Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started and people can join. Thank you all so much for being here. We're so excited and welcome to Austin Design Week 2020. So my name is Maddie Huey and I'm on the ADW team this year. You can see on this slide that you can connect with us and share your experiences over the week by tagging us on social media. Go to the next slide. Perfect. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to join the ADW Slack workspace and we can continue the conversation. We'll be putting that link in the Zoom chat with several other resources for you. And then also there are free events all week. So we encourage you to check out the schedule and join us for more. Next. Great. And lastly, we want to say a huge thanks to our generous sponsors for making this year happen. At the end of the event, you'll be asked to take a brief survey. We'd love to hear from you. We'll put that link in the chat as well. And now I'm going to pass it over to Manuel and get this event started.
Howdy, y'all. Thank you for taking your hour and spending it with us. Today, we are going to be talking about Embrace and Amplify. My name is Manuel Navarro. I go by Manny. I'm the design director and a principal at IA Interior Architects in Austin. And I'll pass it over to Ellie.
Hi everyone, my name is Elizabeth, aka Ellie Guzman. I'm a technical specialist for architecture, engineering, construction at Unity Technologies.
And I am Kat. Oh, thank you. I'm Kat Schneider. I am based out of Boston, and I'm part of the IA Interior Architects Design Intelligence team. I serve the firm as a digital design application specialist, and my area of focus is visualization, VR, and AR. Back to you, Manny.
Thank you. So embrace and amplify, to make larger or greater and to increase. And so what we're talking about today is what happens when you combine the forces of an architecture firm dedicated to creating people-centric spaces with a game engine technology company that develops software platforms to empower creators across industries. And we've been very lucky that we have Unity as a client of ours, and we are designing their office in Austin right now. So today on the agenda, we will do a quick pit stop through the IA Austin office, then talk about the evolving design process. Basically, COVID has forced us into this new predicament of changing our conversation on how we collaborate with our teams, collaborate with our consultants, and also collaborating with our clients. And then reflecting on a new design process moving forward. So a little bit about IA. It was founded in 1984 in California. We are a firm dedicated to designing commercial interior spaces. And this is our home on the east side in Austin. We started the office 3 years ago. We have 23 offices all over the globe. And we are a team of about 27 people, or 27, I shouldn't say about, 27 people in Austin. And so as we walk in, typically we would invite you guys to our office for this event, but we are bringing the office to you. So this is a sneak peek into our kitchen area. We take yearly retreats to Marfa as a team for design inspiration, and a lot of the elements you'll see in the space reference Marfa. So that mural on the wall is designed by Will Bryant. And then we're walking into Susan's City Limits, which is a conference room named after my cat, Susan. A little art piece by Matthew Rodriguez on the right, the Hola, ¿Cómo estás? And this is where we used to have our all hands presentations as a group. And then we have some of our process and photography on the walls. And as we make our way back into the break room, we have a little group picture. We're a team of lighthearted individuals. We work hard and play hard. And typically we present our materials boards and projects to our clients in our library here, populated with a plethora of books, but in reality, it's a lot more materials than it is books. And then we have a sliding bookcase that reveals a little hidden area, which is a little wig and accessory closet. So this is our coworker, Lily, grabbing a wig. And you know, sometimes you just have to pump it up a notch when you are presenting and change character. We're very lucky as designers, we get to enrich people's lives and we get to have fun while we do it. With that, we get to celebrate we tend to celebrate people's birthdays and anniversaries by superimposing people's photos on people's faces on people's photos, old glamour shots. That was Raul. And then there's a project that just is about to start construction called Q2 in northern Austin. And now we're making our way into our living room, AKA Raul's nap area, depending on the time of day. But we worked with a lot of artists on the east side of Austin to help collaborate with our space. So the photograph is by Peter Malik of Marfa during, what's it called? During a New Year's Eve. And then we hired Ellen Bruxford, who designed that fiber screen, the rope screen to separate the space. And the downstairs really is our public facing area. And then as we walk upstairs, we're going into the studio space, which is really our heads down area, which is constantly evolving as we started to go back into the office. Another painting by Will Bryant, some more project photography, and a mixture of sit stand and community areas for the office. And as we make the corner, you'll see Welcome to the Jungle, which is another conference room of ours, with a little cameo by Laura and Holly, and one of the office dogs, Lenny. And then, Ellie, if you don't mind, we can skip ahead a little bit, and we can just work our way to the West Wing, where we have additional private meeting rooms. And then we took cues of Texas again and brought it into some of the bathrooms and the graphics we designed of some West Texas ranches, cattle brands, and whatnot. So that's a little office tour of IA Austin. Thank you, Ellie. And so, as I mentioned earlier, COVID really changed the dynamic of how we deliver information to our clients. And so changes in the workplace are changing our design approach. And so yesterday, which was, 8 or 9 months ago, we were all working in an office. Predominantly 90% of us were in an office with a little bit of remote capabilities. And then in the now and near, we've been forced to either be from home or work from anywhere, wherever that may be. And so that dynamic is starting to shift the conversation moving forward in what offices look like, and also how we deliver our information to our clients. So moving forward, we see a big trend of it being more of a balanced approach, where there's going to be a portion of the employees being remote and some being in the office, and then people being brought back into the office 2 or 3 times a week. But this is allowing us to have more dispersed teams in general. And so I'm going to walk you through the typical design process that we had been doing, and we're still doing it, but doing it in a little bit different way. So we typically start a project with visioning. So it's really about level setting the conversation from an aesthetic standpoint, goals and objectives, a day in the life of the users and employees through the space, and really having a common language to develop and set the tone for the design of the project. And then from there, we take programming information and infill it with all the information that we need to develop a space plan. And we also benchmark that information with our previous companies that we've worked with. And this includes usable square foot per person and different ratios of space types. But honestly, these metrics are changing so fast today, especially with the conversation shifting to a more hybrid work experience. And from this information, we take it into space planning, and then we can go ahead and go to the next slide. And that process was very organic and messy, and you would take out trace and collaborate with your peers in person and present this information to clients live. And obviously that has shifted to a more digital workflow. So if we go to the next one, this really just explains that this whole process has been extremely linear, where you start off with the sketches and plans, and then you start to draw that and build it in the computer, and that turns into a visualization standpoint. And when you want to get something to this like near perfect experience, you go into Photoshop and you do a lot of post-production work to have this moment in time and share that with the clients. And then if you have a change, you have to go back and repeat all these steps. So I'll let Kat talk about the old school way of doing things.
Yeah, so Manny alluded to this cycle in the previous slide, but when we're talking about the old school way, we're really referring to how architecture is still largely practiced today and is changing because of the current climate that we're in. So the architect really drives and begins the design process, which then results in what we refer to as the project model or the 3D content that drives a lot of our documentation. And then separate copies of that project model are then distributed out to these stakeholders. So the client, different engineering folks, the contractor, potentially other VR, AR experiences. And then the takeaways from having that model and having access to that file get rolled up into a process that we call coordination, which loops straight back to the architect and begins again. So this process is definitely time consuming. It's iterative, and in certain cases, things can be lost in translation. And I'm going to hand it back over to Ellie to kind of unpack why some of these things are time consuming.
Thank you, Kat. So it was mentioned this process could be painful, and there are many points to it and reasons behind it. There's a painful data preparation at the beginning where there are many reasons, it can take days or even weeks for highly technical teams to optimize and create all the experiences with the BIM data that we provide. Also, architects and designers, myself, I'm an architect, are not developers. So very few can code in the different capabilities and solutions we have today. Third, while the models are beautifully rendered, usually the information of the metadata is lost, which limits the potential of visualization that we can use for these purposes. And as well, the work is done in silos where not everyone gets the chance to collaborate together in a room, provide their feedback, and have actions from it. That creates a communication breakdown that, of course, results in, costly mistakes and inefficiencies. That doesn't align with the industry today, where we require thousands of iterations and collaboration across many teams. So you're probably wondering, with all these different issues, what are we doing about it at our end? And I will pass it out to Kat to answer that question.
So this is more a representation of what our process has been like with the project that we're going to be sharing with you today. We're calling it the new design process. And you can see that the architect is still generating that project model, but the way that it's distributed becomes more of a conversation and less of a cycle. So the model itself really functions as this single point of truth that then gets pushed out and also is receptive to different models and input from other stakeholders. So what's nice about this new process as well is on the client side, this content can be distributed to end users that may occupy the space in the future. And for contractors, they can actually distribute the information and make it accessible to the subcontractors on site that are actually responsible for making this project come to fruition. So it's a two-way conversation, and there's a constant back and forth and flow of information in this type of pipeline.
Excellent. And like Kavas mentioned, for this new process, we're using Unity for these experiences. So in Unity, you can transfer BIM and CAD data for different platforms or real-time 3D. So we have native plugins such as Navisworks, Rhino, SketchUp, and Revit. We take all that information, we optimize it for, optimization for viewing and visualization in 3D on the cloud on premises, where you can use your laptop, your desktop, your VR device or AR component for visualizing the data. And for those of you who do not know Unity, Unity is the most widely used real-time 3D development platform in the world right now. It allows everyone, from emerging creators to global technologies, people in AEC, in manufacturing, in automotive, and film, and all these different industries, all the different tools that they need to create real-time 3D experiences. And yesterday we were concentrating on gaming. We're a game engine company, but today we're not only doing gaming, we're doing architecture, engineering, construction, of course, utility, energy, automotive, aerospace, healthcare, life science, just to name a few. Our users are creating real-time 3D experiences in all these different industries using Unity. But what is real-time 3D? Well, it is something that is immersive. It is interactive. It looks real. It acts real. It's like a high-end video game. So in real-time 3D, you can walk through a model, you can open doors, you can overlay content in there, and everything you see, the animations, the light, the reflection, all that is being rendered in real time. So with all this information, different uses that we have our clients outside of game using Unity, We created a product specifically for AEC, and that product is Unity Reflect. Reflect is a BIM design and coordination solution that allows and connects everyone, project members and decision makers, designers, end users, stakeholders, into one immersive, collaborative, real-time platform, regardless of the device you're using, the model size, of the geographic location. You can transfer your BIM data from Revit, Navisworks, SketchUp, and Rhino. We have native plugins inside all those applications. And you can create real-time 3D experiences on a range of devices that you can have in augmented reality, in virtual reality, allowing our users to bridge the gap between design and decision makers. Reflect is a design review and coordination solution that allows for the following. You can communicate design intent with immersive and interactive experiences, allowing everyone to immerse themselves into the design review process. It's a fast decision making that we have with Data Federation and LiveLink. So any changes that you make in a platform, like you change the materials in Revit, you move the information of the 3D models, you will see that in Reflect in seconds. Also, you can use Reflect in any platform, anywhere. So you can connect multiple stakeholders and you can tie the office to the field. And last but not least, it is a flexible custom application that you can build upon. So you have a starting launching pad for creating any additional implementations that we don't offer out of the box. So now to show you an example of how you can use Unity Reflect for different use cases, I will pass it back to the interior architects team.
Thank you, Ellie. So we had a really interesting situation when we started working with Unity back in February. We started the design process actually in March when we went on lockdown. And so that really forced us to change and adapt our model of delivering information to our clients. And so we partnered up with Unity and used their Unity Reflect program. Can you go back one slide, Ellie? This is just an example of how the analog version of collaboration has been moved to the digital world. And so as we started to develop the concept for Unity, moving to the Foundry 2 building on the east side, we started to put together all this information to see each other work live and collaborate and mark up, just as we would if we were in the office together. And so as we start to develop a concept, and what we've learned along the way is that our process of telling the story to communicating the design to the client has to evolve as well. So you have to kind of see it through a cinematic lens, and we're still learning this process. But if you go to the next slide, it starts to tell a little bit about the concept development for Unity in Austin. So Unity offices are unified but unique. And so they're unique to the cities that they coincide in or live in per se. And so we, as a team, we collaborated and try to step back and understand what Unity's values are, what does a game engine or gaming, that kind of mindset allow you to do, and that's really expand storytelling. And so this idea of telling stories to share our experiences, dreams, passions, and to help us connect with others, but most importantly, our stories make up who we are. And so what we started to think about is superimposing Austin with that mindset and creating these two characters in the space. So this idea of the cowboy who tells stories, and that the idea of cowboy culture is honest, authentic, rugged, and wild. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is the idea of the drifter. And so that character is more effortless, confident, free, and a more of a wandering spirit, which really epitomizes this idea of Austin. So as we began to tell that story, we ended up with this visual position that has some keywords that really started the framework for our narrative throughout the space. And then the next slide starts to develop the architectural language that we built off of the idea of the cowboy and the drifter. So the cowboy and the drifter is really the dichotomy that epitomizes Austin. So it's laid back but cool and refined. And then we came up with this architectural language to use throughout the space, which is rigid and fluid. And so you see these two ideas kind of melding together as we look at this project. And what I think is really interesting is we just issued construction documents for this project last Friday. And then on Monday, we actually toured the entire end users for the space through Unity Reflect. And really Unity Reflect, the way that we're using it for this exercise and collaborating with our teams and all the decision makers is it's a moment in time. It doesn't have to be fully rendered to some extent where it's so finished, because it's a constantly evolving process. And every Friday, Kat pushes out a new update. And so actually all the consultants, all the decision makers get real-time updates and see what is going on within the space. And so if you want to go to the next one, we'll go ahead and have an MTV Crib style tour of Unity in Austin. We have some music, but it sounds like a little bit like a pharmaceutical ad, so I think we're going to turn it off. Unfortunately, I think that's something that we're learning as part of this communication storytelling, is that, you know, it needs to be multisensory. You need to be able to tell a story with audio as well, and the choices for that are very limited. In the reception area, it's more of the cowboy aesthetic. There was a little point in the reception desk in the floor that alludes to Matthew McConaughey with an all right, all right, all right inlaid into the floor. We have a custom banquet area for virtual reality here. And this is where they can showcase some of their technology. What you'll see a lot of in real life is leather and suede and kind of that essence of a cowboy, complete with horse bits kind of attaching the back of the banquettes. And then a little portal into the boardroom here, which is what we're calling back in the saddle, where big decisions are made. A little hint at the hospitality bar. So as a guest experience, you can come in and grab a drink, make yourself comfortable. Unity is going to be on the 6th floor, the top floor of the Foundry 2. So they have a large patio that overlooks downtown. And then we're walking into the boardroom, which is a mixture of white oak and shoshujibon wood, which is charred wood, and leather-clad acoustical panels. And then from a furniture component, we're just in a point in time where we're still selecting some furniture. So the furniture you see are just placeholders, but Unity Reflect lets you stay in this environment, and you can add additional information. So you can superimpose specifications to each individual object. So as a subcontractor or as a furniture dealer, you can point or hover over something and it will tell you exactly what that piece is. This is the saloon, which is our restroom for guests. And we used it as a study with the decision makers, where they wanted something that was private, but still open and accessible. So we're actually going back and adding some saloon doors to make it a little bit more private. And this is the all hands area. And what you see back there is a placeholder graphic. We're working with some local Austin artists here to make those decisions with the end users for their input. And we're just beginning to tell the story and explore this with the clients and the whole team. And Ellie, if you want to skip ahead a little bit, we can just go towards the music room. So we listened to the end users. They really wanted to be able to celebrate the music culture of Austin. We're including a music room that's yet to be named. So we're working with the end users to figure that out. And again, working with some local artists to develop custom graphics for that room. So we'll take a peek in there. So it's acoustical panels and drapery right now, but we're missing the next layer, which is the rugs and accessories and the next piece of storytelling. This is the tea point, what we're calling Hint a Mint. It's a little place to get a drink, so you don't have to walk all the way to the break room. And then now we're walking into the more drifter area, which is this idea of the campfire or the library, more laid back. But as the workplace is evolving, we need more places for people to come and touch down and get away. And then what you see in the ceiling is this idea of a lariat or a rope that's reinterpreted as neon. And so this is, again, the more heads down area of the library or the campfire. We'll have day use lockers. And then I think you can go to the next slide, Ellie, and we can talk about this in more detail. But what's been really interesting with all of our clients is the conversations that is evolving in terms of the ratios of what they thought dedicated desks would be versus non-dedicated desks. If you go back one, sorry, Ellie. The library function has evolved to include more individual heads down areas. And so what we did is we were able to show that live with the client and then make decisions faster. So we didn't have to take a week to make these conversations, to have these conversations and implement the changes. You can go forward, it's fine.
Yeah, I think an interesting component of this as it's evolved has been to see how we merge the very tactile nature of some of these finishes that Manny has spoken about. And so we'll get into a little bit of how we put together that kit of parts later on. But this is an actual decision that was made through the process that was able to be possible a lot more efficiently through Reflect. So the moon-shaped sort of crescent window that you're seeing was present in our design development phase. And when we started to walk through the environment, someone from the AV team on the Unity side had mentioned, hey, this looks like it may block some of the views or sightlines that we need to have for the equipment. And if we were in our traditional process, we would not necessarily have captured this piece of the floor plate. And so we were able to just jump behind that space and actually confirm where the problem areas lied. And then if you advance to the next slide, this is taken from a more current iteration of that same sort of living document of the project, where you can see and we can confirm that the sight lines that are needed to make this space functional are present. So it really eliminated a lot of what would typically be back and forth in emails, screenshots, different markups, into just being able to look at and experience and address the issue live all together as a team.
Exactly. And what you see as well, you see in the on their menu category, we have the beam filtering options. So you might see sometimes the furniture appearing and disappearing during the video. So we have the option to filter out and isolate, hide, and show different components. And all this information, the beam data, comes from your models, your Revit model, Navisworks, and all different implementations. And you can easily toggle them in Reflect.
One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of this is that we have time at the end of this to answer any questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A portion at the bottom, and we'll address those at the end. And then back to the campfire area, I think I already covered this, but this is where we use this tool to make the decisions faster, where the workplace is changing for Unity and how they're approaching coming into the office and the cadence of that. And so what we're finding out is there's going to be more influx of 2 to 3 day workers coming into the office for temporary use. And so what we did is adapt certain portions of the floor plan to allow for more heads down spaces for those people to come in. So the next slide shows the interpretation of where we're at today. Again, with the placeholder furniture, the finishes haven't been quite selected, but the furniture pieces themselves are fairly accurate in representation.
Right, and talking about the sort of furniture element and component, those pieces actually came from the furniture vendor. And so this is an example of how Reflect has been a play space for us to put all of our content together and see how it interfaces. And then this is another example of the way that you can play within the Reflect environment. So this is us being able to toggle and really see and experience how different daylighting conditions may infiltrate this library space. It was interesting to just see how some of the elements like the drapery and also the large extent of windows just played into where shadows will fall. You can play around with where the north angle lives, time of day, time of year. So you really get to span the gamut of what you can experiment with and visualize in this real-time platform. And then this is an example. So we ended up opening up access to the Reflect model to all of the potential contractors on the job. And this is our first time doing something like this, but to reference that diagram where it's really a conversation of our models and others, this is an example of a systems model that has been exported out of a software called Navisworks. It's not really within the native suite of things that we as architects use, but it's able to be visualized the same as our model in that same location. And so really becomes kind of a participatory exercise as we coordinate. And Ellie's going to talk about how that happens in the platform.
One thing I want to chime in here is that typically during the design process, at certain milestones, let's say design development, we issue a package of drawings and sometimes include renderings in that to contractors for pricing and or to award the bid to the contractor to select to work with in the future on the project. On this project, we actually we sent out our drawings, but in addition, we sent out this entire model to all the contractors, and the subcontractors had access to it as well. And so with the filtering, they can look at all the different components. And what ended up happening, either the market is just very good for building right now, or everyone's pricing was very much in line with each other due to the information that they all had access to. And so I thought it was a really excellent example of collaborating with the contractors in terms of telling our story with all the things we want built and the narrative built into it, and then getting numbers that are very tight to each other, and allowing the conversation to be shifted from the financial aspect of it to more of the experience and the personalities involved with the teams delivering to mesh with the client.
Exactly. And all that collaboration and information is allowing Reflectable to bring different models into one. So you can merge, like Kat and Manny mentioned, you can merge data, let's say the architectural information from Revit, but then having in same place the Navisworks information about the mechanical system, the structural information. So you can merge data from different platforms and sources and able to visualize it all together in Reflect in a design review, where you can involve different stakeholders, designers, engineers to look at that together. You can also do even more with Reflect. So what we presented so far is what we have out of the box, but you can definitely unite Reflect and Unity Pro is user engine to further customize the experience. Like, for example, you can create photorealistic environments with high fidelity walkthroughs. Typically, like Manny mentioned before too, the level of quality and rendering that each Reflect provides is more than sufficient for a design review meeting. But let's say in other instances, such as winning a bid, you want a more polished model, and you can definitely achieve that with the materials and different information you have by uniting Reflect and Unity Pro. Another example that you can have to customize experience with Reflect is to have VR training and safety. So here we have Skanska using Unity to train their colleagues and employees on the safety of their offices or their home without having to be in a construction site, and be able to train on the machinery, the different flows, being secure, and at the same way being efficient about the training. Another great example too is with one of our clients, Shop Architects, using Unity to overlay AR construction content into a real construction site. So this is going to be built in Brooklyn. So you just take your mobile device, your iPad, and you overlay the content into the real world, so you can able to see everything before the construction is even finished. So imagine not having to have to go through dozens of paperwork or PDFs in the construction site. You have everything you need on site to visualize the information just with your iPad. And with further customizations and information, I will allow Kat to mention more about what IA is doing with Reflect.
So these are just some examples. Reflect has become part of a larger conversation for us internally, as Manny alluded to, about how we evolve our process now that we're distributed, and evolve that past what is possible in Zoom. So these are a couple of examples from different platforms that we utilize in a service offering called IAXR, which is really leveraging mixed reality to have collaborative sessions virtually, whether it's through mixed reality, augmented reality, or a virtual reality headset. And so Reflect is part of that toolkit and part of that conversation. And a lot of the tech that drives the examples that you're seeing is also underpinned with Unity technologies as well.
And just to go back on the slide that we saw previously with the AR in the job site, in the job field, we are looking to implement this technology with the Unity project in Austin, which starts construction in the spring. And so we're working with the contractor to leverage the technology so we can be able to use it like this. So we're really excited about that potential and how that will change our conversation moving forward with our teams. Thank you, Ellie, for going backwards.
No worries.
Awesome. And thank you guys all for being here and taking the time out. We are going to turn to, I'm seeing some questions pour in. I want to address the first question first because it's low-hanging fruit, but is the tool being discussed called Reflect? And yes, it's Unity Reflect that we're showing examples from, as well as the Unity Pro editor. And before we jump into questions, actually, I'm seeing this slide. Feel free to scan any of these QR codes to engage with us. We would love to continue the conversation that we're starting here today and hear from you. And there's a code for a Unity Reflect trial, a code to learn a bit more and engage with IA, as well as opportunity to join the discussion with Unity on the QR code on the right. All right. see, we've got some good questions here. I am going to kick off the conversation by turning it over to Ellie and Manny. I'm curious, Ellie, in your experience as a technical specialist, and Manny, for you as a design director, how do you see this technology really changing the makeup of teams and also the ecosystem of the architecture, engineering, and construction verticals?
You want to start, Ellie?
Oh, yeah, sure. So what I've seen being used, like a lot of in education too, and having diversity in the teams. So right now, in the education aspect, you will have students and teams and different components are learning new technologies and new different ways to implement things, for VR, for AR, for different, even using a game engine. I'm an architect. I never thought I would be working on a game engine company, utilizing game engine for this type of experiences. So the teams will be diverse, more diversified, different technologies will be implemented, so everyone can collaborate together in the same meeting, in the same review.
I agree with Ellie, and I think the talent acquisition in the future, or how we augment our team structure, is going to change because, like Ellie mentioned at the beginning, we're not coders by training. And I think that conversation may start to shift in terms of architecture and design education, where coding is going to be something that is integrated into the education curriculum, because our projects are becoming much more complex. The technology is becoming more complex, but it's allowing us to do so many more things. And through that lens, the way that we're delivering and telling these stories, it all comes down to communication. To me, I think you have to start branching out and being more diversified in terms of what you're interested in. And, I think you have to have a little bit of a cinematic lens. Perhaps we need to augment our staff with some sound engineers, because the pharmaceutical ad music is just so tragic to be used on backgrounds for our projects that are royalty free. And so it really needs to become this multi-sensory experience. And I'm really excited about what that will become in the future.
Great. Just checking out some of the questions. We've actually had a couple of questions come in about the multisensory experience. So we got a question from someone tuning in. Love the multisensory immersive experience. How does your immersive space integrate workflows across multiple channels? And I think along the lines of the multisensory immersive experience, it's been interesting from the outside jumping into this project, because my work is largely visualization. I'm usually doing these types of simulation environments, and that is really one part of the offering. It was great to see Manny and the design team actually ship physical samples in sort of a gift box type of thing, so that as they were going through this environment, some of the folks on the client side could actually experience what it feels like to touch that wood, the scent component of it. And so I think the architectural practice in general and how we start to represent things is really evolving into something that engages as many of the senses as the built environment does. And Manny, I don't know if you have anything to add to
Well,
that.
I just think it's almost becoming more responsible from us from a sustainability standpoint. You don't have to travel to go visit your clients, on a weekly basis, or whatever that cadence was. Now we can interact with each other and, virtually, and still get a somewhat realistic experience of what that is, depending on the technology that's available for that person.
Great. We've got another question, maybe an odd question, but having spent time in MMORPGs, I see a lot of untapped potential for completely virtual work or social spaces. Do you think that this is realistic or desirable in the near future? And if not, what are the barriers? I could probably start.
That's an interesting question. Yeah.
Desirable?
Yes.
That's a hot question.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
Very subjective.
There's definitely a lot of potential for these completely virtual workspaces. And actually, as an anecdotal example, IA's leadership met in VR last week all together. So they put the headsets on, they were represented virtually through avatars, and they got to meet each other in person, in air quotes. So we're definitely working through and unpacking the value that adds. There's a ton of things, as Manny said, that people do have opinions on. The way you're represented virtually opens up an entire conversation about digital representation and ethics and and there's lots of facets of that. So that's definitely a bit of a barrier. And then as we start to experiment, even on the Unity project with new technology, we have been asking ourselves, you know, a lot of these softwares, they run really well on high-end machines, but that doesn't necessarily allow us to distribute something equally. And so Ellie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how we've been able to use Reflect to distribute this across lots of different devices.
Yeah. So one of the big things with Reflect is also the distribution for any device is a simple way to do. So we have out of the box connections, like for the VR headset, for example, like I was mentioning, you can use the Oculus Rift. You just have to click a button in Reflect and you right away immerse yourself into the experience. We have any further coding, any further programming that you need to do to order to implement it or experience it. So it's really easy to do. We also try to do the same for the AR components. So as you saw part of the views through the images, we have the iPad. You just take your iPad, just click a button, and it takes you to the AR mode right away. So you can easily place a model in the space and go around and work around it, isolate, hide, and show different things. So it allows technical and non-technical users to be able to see the model in a different way without having the training, you know, the experience to know how to use the tool.
And I think what's really interesting about that is, you know, even if we present renderings to some clients, they still can't visualize the space, even when the rendering kind of is a perfect example. We can show previous examples of the rendering and then the built version where they're very much in line, but there's still some people that can't, there's a barrier there for whatever reason. And so I think the AR component will allow us to present information almost live, essentially by holding the iPad with a furniture or a material change, and allow the end user or the client, I should say, to select different options that we preset for them to review. So instead of having different static images of options or plans, they can literally just select the textile or fabric or furniture that they want to swap out and see which one feels the best for the space, which I think is a lot of has a lot of potential from decision making in our moving forward. Sorry.
I did get an interesting question I'm going to throw to you, Manny. How are we addressing the architect's need for flexibility within and the more rigid structure of BIM modeling?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask because I'm a little bit jaded in that arena. I think the workflows have to evolve, and I think as the education from the student perspective becomes more digitally native, I do, in my own opinion, I think if you only work in Revit, you are under this influence of a very rigid system. And so if you're allowed to be more free and loose, like trace paper and sketch, which there's obviously options available for that, but that process needs to be easily migrated into that environment. And I don't think that those two things have married up just yet. And so I do think there's an ease of use with SketchUp because it's just super intuitive versus Revit, unless you're a master user. But sometimes you need to work fast and you don't want to figure out all the certain components. But I don't really know if this answers your question per se, but I think that there's still some obstacles to overcome to make that transition more seamless.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a goal, right? There's still to answer that question. I think the answer is not quite defined. It's part of our ever evolving process, because I think some of the examples you showed in the beginning where you're sketching, that facility of using a pen and you know how to use a pen and it does exactly what you know you're capable of doing is really what we want to shoot for with design technology. And so it being able to have access to those full suite of customizations at least allows us to play in that arena and also leverage a bit of the experience we have designing spaces that people inhabit in this new kind of mixed reality and digital.
And I think what's also interesting is that, you know, we are building things in 3D, but that once it's built, it's done, right? We never really reference that model again. And this really starts to expand that conversation. And for people that are working more dispersed, we can utilize the built environment, like let's say the conference room we designed for Unity in Austin, and they can host meetings in that room, depending on the technology you use, you know? So from an attraction and retention standpoint, you can tour people through, especially in times like this, of what the space is like, what your office culture is like I did for our own office. And so I think the storytelling component is very strong in the future there.
Great. We got a question I'm going to throw back to you, Manny. I have a question on how all of this technology affects the budget. Is it more expensive to use all of these gadgets and new applications for the client? Is it better to use all of this tech on larger scale projects? And is it easy to train your team for these new technology transitions?
So I'm going to start backwards with is it easy to train your team for these new the technology transitions? So, you know, we're very lucky in this aspect that we work very closely with the Unity engineering team, and they were available for help as we start to learn this program. And Kat, I mean, is amazingly talented and knows how to speak the code language and way beyond conversations like over my head personally. But you really need to start augmenting your team and building a team that can work together and is a more cross-trained team to be delivering these projects. In terms of budget, that's a very good question. The conversation of fees on a project, I mean, I think you could study the fact that we were able to make decisions quicker in certain aspects of what we did. So there's the lag time of having to create another meeting for this, basically the sake of having another meeting to get a sign off is eliminated, and we can have it all done at once. And it's not this behind the curtains kind of magician show anymore, which is nice, but I think there's more transparency into what we're doing with the client and with all the consultants. So I can't really answer the in terms of the budget, but I do think that there's some efficiencies in making it more clear and making the communication more clear to the contractors and the subcontractors of what we're expecting. And we can field any issues ahead of time with the AR component, which again is yet to be tested because we haven't gotten there yet. They're not going to start construction until the spring, but I think that is the plan to go back and reference how we did on the project.
Yeah, and regards of the product and in Unity, we really try to make it as easy as possible as a tool to be used by anyone. So we try to make it a lot of features out of the box. You know, everyone can immerse themselves. Easy to use options like for VR, AR, beam filtering, navigation. So we really try to listen to our users and make it like myself, like we mentioned before. I'm an architect too. I'm not a coder. I work with design. So we might make it as easy as possible for everyone to train their teams and be able to use the tool as soon as they can. Also, in terms of pricing as well, we try to accommodate for you only need a license to export the information from the platforms to reflect. But if you want to use the viewers, those are distributed for free to your clients or to anyone that you need for the visualization. So we try to accommodate and look at all these different, implementations because we know it's new tools for a lot of different teams. So we try to make it as easy as possible in that regard.
The next question that I'm seeing is, love the multi-sensory immersive distributed office. How are you helping clients, subcontractors, and residents transition to this conversational model that uses open data? Sidewalk Labs tried this with I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce that, Quayside project in Toronto. I'm sure I'm embarrassing myself, but it raised a lot of questions about accessibility and privacy issues. And so this may be a topic that we can all weigh in on. But Ellie, I may shift it to you first to just answer the question of how does Reflect engage in this conversation about how much data is available to be leveraged these days?
Yeah, so in regards of data, we know it comes from different sources. So we know not everyone just sticks to one platform for everything. Each platform has their pros and cons. So usually everyone uses different applications. Like if I want to quickly model something, I might use SketchUp. If I want to go really into BIM, I use Revit. If I want to have the structural information, I will go with Navisworks. So we acknowledge that in Unity, and we try to support different platforms natively. So we have plugins inside, but also that you're allowed to bring all that information for different platforms. We optimize that information and we put it in the same model. So it's merged. So it's as easy as to filter by the different options to isolate the data, the different sources that you have. So you don't have to worry about, need to open my Revit model. Then I need to reference to the SketchUp model and look at the different window for the Navisworks. It's everything in one place.
Ellie, Kat, do you want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I think it's it's another one of those examples where it's just an ongoing conversation. I mean, people are very passionate about how data is used, what it's used for. I know I'm located in Boston. The city of Boston has a huge repository of public data that they've just made available to folks. And some people feel that it's really advancing what we're able to do with technology and better serve the city. And some people feel like it's a massive invasion of their privacy. So I think it's for me, it's definitely one of the things I'm very interested in as we get closer to technology in our architectural lens, because we see ourselves looking at data, hoping to use it to improve people's lives, but it's also acknowledging that sensitivity to it, surveillance and things like that.
I think that ties into one of the comments that Sherry just posted regarding mental health. I think that is some component that is still out there to be studied, and we don't know the answers to that. The psychological aspect of being fully immersed in an environment. I think, Kat, you probably have more information on this, but the managing director meeting that was hosted all virtually last week or the week before, I think there was a time limit that you guys had the whole team kind of under virtual in that VR, AR environment, because we don't know the effects it takes on the human body just yet, you know?
Right. Yeah, and with the convergence of all these things, we talked about how, architects aren't necessarily sound designers. We're not necessarily the best at video editing. There's a whole, biology and neuroscience avenue of this that really figures out, as we start to plug in a bit more, how do we unplug and really curate experiences so that we're not overwhelming people and we're using the tech to make better, not make more. Definitely.
That's a good point. And I think we're still learning this whole process, and it's evolving, which is really exciting.
Mm-hmm. We had a couple of questions come in about furnishings and furniture in general. Will collaboration with vendors to add furnishings to the presentation become the norm?
That would be amazing. I think it would be, yes, we would like it to become the norm, because that is such a critical component to the storytelling of and what really makes the space, and being able to leverage the tools that the furniture dealers, furniture manufacturers have at their fingertips, and working with them to embed the information into the models rather than having to go back and add the information. I think that's where there's a lot of advantages, is to get ahead of the conversation with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a question along this lines. Do the furniture manufacturers have to have certain compatible technology, or does this tech take a photo or sample and convert the project document? And so I'll kick off by saying I think our ecosystem in general is moving more to 3D models, but there are certainly, particularly with the Unity Foundry project that we presented, there are definitely elements that it's very difficult to capture what they actually feel like. And I'm not sure if either of you have anything to add in that area.
Honestly, you two kind of handled that on this project more so than I did.
Yeah, so definitely in regards to furniture, like Evans mentioned, initially 3D, we have tools in Unity to enhance, the 3D and the material, the information coming from furniture, like our engine, and using different components in the engine as well. We also try for visualization to have like a more crisp details on the furniture, the lighting, the occlusion, the different color sampling, so we're working towards that, and different implementations do like scanning other different, components, and how we can bring that data into the software for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think working with Unity software in general has given me such an appreciation for how complex imperfections are in our real life reality. Trying to simulate, that perfect kind of dimple that you get in a pillow, or something like the things that you really expect when you see soft textiles and things that make up a lot of our work. It's a complex art form for sure. Let's see. We got a question about, so we'll do second to last question and then we'll wrap up here. Is there a particular reason for navigating the model by moving point to point or with transitions instead of controlling the camera in space like a video game? So the we edited a video together for the purposes of this so that I did not have to drive you through the space and potentially make anyone feel sick. But that is actually the interaction that you experience in Reflect. So you can teleport around the space, or a lot of times I will kind of drive and zoom live. And Ellie, I don't know if you want to speak to the other ways that you can view the model.
Yeah, so definitely. So you definitely have your like typical gaming WASD keyboard components that you can navigate. You can use your mouse. With the mobile component, you can easily use your fingers to work around and lock yourself into a view. You can fly in mode. There's a flying mode as well. So there are different ways you can just click on an element too and it takes you there. So we definitely have like navigation, and I would say it's one of our strongest points coming as a game engine, because we definitely have analyzed a lot of different ways to how to navigate through space. So we have many ways to navigate that for sure.
Awesome. And we're coming up to the top of the hour here, so I think I will wrap up with one more question. I personally got my start in tech and got introduced to Unity when I was actually in Austin at a hackathon for South by Southwest. There's a lot of self-teaching, and there's tons of resources out there. If we have people who are on the call, either design professionals or aspiring technologists, what would both of your advice to those folks be in terms of where they could get started and how they can engage with this dialogue that we're having?
I think I'll just give them your email address, Kat, and, and then Ellie's, and then they can begin the conversation there.
Well, I will say further that after the, giving the email, replying to the email, I will mention that you just think outside the box. Like I mentioned myself, I'm an architect myself. I never thought I would be working for a game engine company, but technologies have evolved, and companies have realized that you had to be versatile. You had to create, work with different tools, do different things. So don't be afraid of trying something new, trying something different. Don't be afraid to talking to someone that you might think like, oh, I don't have anything in common with this person. Why would we even reach out or have a conversation? Just go ahead and, I would say, just be out your box and try different things. You never know what life can take you. So just experience them for sure.
Yeah, I think the more varied your background can be, or your interest, the more exposure you have to all these things. I mean, honestly, going through this exercise really has made me think that we need to be looking at things through a cinematic lens. And how do you tell that compelling story to the client and to the end user, which is a different delivery method than we're used to. So.
Definitely. Okay. Well, huge thank you to everybody that is with us today. We appreciate you taking an hour and spending it with us, and I'll hand it back to Maddie.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, and thanks for this wonderful presentation. That was awesome. We did post a link in the chat to a survey, so if you want to go ahead and click on that. Otherwise, we'll end it here. Please check out the schedule for more events. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Stay safe.
Bye. Thank you.